So today I'm going to show you how to replace a rear main seal on a motor. The particular car that we're working on is a 2000 Chevy Tahoe 4x4. So there's a few steps involved in it. We're going to try to speed this up for you and kind of work and shoot, work and shoot. Anyway, but you'll understand what we're talking about. And also, we're going to explain to you why you're getting that burning oil smell when you need a rear main oil seal replaced, and explain to you why the oil is actually leaking. So stick around, take a look, and if you have any comments or questions, subscribe, post at the end of the video. And other than that, hope you enjoy. So today we're working on a 99, I think it's a 99 or 2000 Chevy Tahoe. Basically pretty much all the same vehicles up under the skin here when it comes to this portion of the vehicle. So it has a rear main seal leak, which, as you can see, you see these oil droplets coming here. The customer was complaining about oil buildup in his driveway, and as you can see here, there's oil that's building up between your engine and the transmission, and it'll puddle up here and it'll come drip down. So that is covering his driveway. And another complaint is the smoke from time to time when the vehicle smokes. Well, the reason for that is when you're driving along and this oil is coming down, okay, the setup of this vehicle has the exhaust system, the exhaust pipes that come down and cut across up under the transmission. Now, this oil is building up here on this pipe. This pipe gets extremely hot because the catalytic converter sits here for one, and that's the hottest portion on the vehicle. And of course, the heat's going to travel down the pipe, but as the oil hits the pipe, it's going to heat up, and if it gets hot enough, of course, it will smoke. So we're going to take this transmission out, as well as the 4x4 differential. We're going to take out the shaft, and we're going to take out the rear shaft. Alright, so there's a lot of steps involved in this, and we're going to take out the support member here to get to that rear main seal. So let's begin. First step that I like to start with is in the rear. Actually, I like to go ahead and remove this the drive shaft. Okay, you've got 11mm heads on these bolts here, so boom boom, undo that. You don't want to lose these bolts. These are not like you can go to the store and get them. You could, but you want this to be a balanced unit here, so don't lose these bolts, don't mess them up. Use 11mm socket to take them off. A swivel helps also when you're taking this off. So pull these bolts out, pull the bolts out there. Now be careful when you're pulling this out. I actually cut my hand one time doing this. I almost cut my finger off actually one time because it was a 2-portion shaft and it bent down and cut into my hand real bad, my thumb there, but like in the joint. So be careful when you're doing this. Stick a pry bar in through here, pry forward. All right, once you pry forward, you see how that comes out. All right, you don't want to lose these caps. I know some guys will take some tape and wrap around there so the caps will not fall off. You want to secure that, because if those caps fall off, then the needle bearings inside fall off, and that creates a whole nother problem. So, and you can actually remove this shaft by just pulling it straight out. It will slide straight out. See that slide? There you go. Now once you slide that out, sometimes you will have transmission fluid that will fall down. You might want to have something to catch that. I'm not going to pull it out all the way right now because I'm filming with one hand and trying to explain with the other. Once you get that shaft out, you're going to drop this cross member. That's why we have these bolts undone there. But in order to get the cross member out easily, you're going to need a jack or something to jack this transmission up to get the weight off of it so that this can easily be maneuvered. Alright, so we're going to set all that up and we'll be back in just a second. Also, another quick note, before removing that drive shaft, I forgot about that, I like to mark it, with some white paint. That way I have the drive shaft back in the same location where it was, the same little area. You see that groove in there? Okay, so it's basically sitting in the same place it was when I took it out. Don't want to create any problems. Might not matter, but just for my method, I like to mark that. I like to put things back into place where they came from. All right, after you remove your rear your rear drive shaft, you want to come up here to the front, on the side of your differential here. You'll see where your front axle comes up. Excuse me. Transfer case up to the front differential. You'll see there's another drive shaft. Okay, you want to go ahead and remove that drive shaft. Again, once you get those bolts out, go ahead and mark them, or mark it before you take the bolts out. That way you're putting it back in the same place. Now, for ease of storage, I like to put my bolts back into the flange there. You know, that way I know they're there. Okay, once I remove the shaft. As you can see back here in the back, see how we have the bolts there, and we still have our lockdown tabs as well as our bolts. That's not going anywhere. So now also you can, neat little trick, see that, turn that, do that, turn that. Okay, that's your rear differential there. That's the back of the transmission. Okay, so we're going to remove these. We're going to pull out this front shaft here. That'll give you access to the bolts that go around the bell housing of the transmission. Okay, so before removal, we'll mark it. I like to use some big white out. Pretty good product for this, being that we don't really type term papers anymore, like we used to. I remember when I was in school, I was talking to somebody the other day, and was a younger kid, and he was like, "Man, school's so hard." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Man, I got all these papers and stuff like that I got to do." I was like, "Man, you are tripping." And he was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you know, back in the day when I went to school, we had to type all of our stuff. And not only that, if you made a daggone mistake on the typewriter, a lot of typewriters didn't have the autocorrect, and a lot of the professors were like, hey, wait a second, I don't want no mistakes on this paper. Every mistake is a deduction. You got to have it and type it perfect." So, oh yeah, we didn't have Google either, where you could just look up the answer. You had to actually go to the library and do some research. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. So you want to go ahead and mark that. Turn that shaft. All right, so that you can get your pry bar in there. So basically stick your pry bar in there. Just work it back. Real easy. Okay. Real easy. Work that out of there. I'm going to pause this again because it's hard to do with one hand. Okay, now that we have that removed out of the way, you'll notice I just let this kind of hang here. I'm going to get some tape and I'll secure that so that those won't fall off. But you can actually let that one just hang there because we don't necessarily need to take it off from the car. We just had to dismantle it, disconnect it, so that when we move this transmission back here to get to the seal. Now, but one little quick trick while you're here, you see that right there? That's your exhaust manifold flange. And I would recommend, you may need to disconnect those so that you can get a little more tilt on your motor. Later on in the video you'll see what I'm talking about as far as tilting the motor. But while you're here, go ahead and spray those down with some good penetrating oil. Those get hot, you don't want to break that off. So put some penetrating oil on that just in case you gotta disconnect those. I actually like to use PB Blaster for this process. Some people will swear by WD-40. Everybody has their preference. And we'll go ahead and spray that down. We'll let that sit there for a while so that when we do get to that point, then it'll be easy to take off and won't have to worry about breaking our bolts. Alright, so we have our rear drive shaft off. Okay. We have our front drive shaft disconnected. Now, at this point, you're going to need something to lift that transmission up so that you can remove that support beam here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mount up our transmission lift and get that worked on, and then we'll come right back. Also, quick note on this, as you're taking this support bar off here, this side the screws will come out pretty easy. But this side there's a little flange here. You need to just pull that off, and that will expose you to the other bolts that are under there. Okay, so to get those bolts out, what you want to do is have a wrench on one side to hold it, and use your air wrench on the other side to take that out. Because if you don't hold it, it will just spin around on you. So you want to hold it while you're removing these bolts on the back side. And I'll see if we can do this without me holding that wrench. See that? That allows you to loosen it. That's now loose. We'll pause again, I'll get those bolts out and we'll proceed. Okay, so after you get those bolts out, notice how we have one side to drop down and the other side isn't. And we got the bolts out of here to disconnect them from the transmission mount. This side we got one bolt out. Of course, we got one bolt stuck, as you know, Murphy's Law would have it. So remember earlier I told you to spray down your exhaust manifold flange? Okay, so now you're gonna have to lower this exhaust manifold so that you can get that bolt out of the way. Therefore, that flange, that cross member will drop out of there. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll resume. Now, when removing the taut bolt here on this flange, it will make it so much easier if you use a swivel to get in there, because otherwise you can't get a good angle on it. And let's see here. So you get a good angle on there, pull it off, and I recommend using a 1/2-inch air gun if you got it, because that'll go ahead and take it on off of there after you've sprayed it down good, of course. Now that'll drop down once we get the other side off, and then that'll allow us to remove our bolt there. Okay, so now we have those loose, and you see there's space there. We can pull this down now and get that last bolt out. See that? See that? And pull that bad boy on out of there. And now that you have that bolt out, this cross member should just drop on down out of there. You may need to take your pry bar and pull it down, but once that's out of the way, then that'll give you access to your bolts here that you'll need to remove to take off the rear portion of the transmission. Then you can get up to the transmission. Okay, so now that you have your cross member taken out, you see that? You see that? Take that out. Now you'll take the differential, the transfer case out. Here, here, here. I think there's a bolt at the top. Some people will elect to do it this way. Either way, whichever bolts you can get to the easiest. You may have to take this mount off so that you can see those bolts up there. But what you want to know is every side you want to take off. Take either side of that off, and remove, or then you want to remove and take this out. Once you do that, then you'll come up here and you'll get the bell housing bolts on the transmission and pull the starter. Well, I don't think you have to pull the starter on this model actually, because it's bolted down here at the bottom instead of bolted through the bell housing. And then we're going to slide this transmission back, and we'll have access to that rear main oil seal. I told you, it's a process. So we're going to have a lot of pauses and breaks while I do work, and then come back and film. All right. So as you're pulling the transfer case from the transmission, you will get a little seepage from the transmission fluid. So you might want to have something down there to catch that fluid as it falls down. Once we get this last bolt out, that transfer case will be able to slide back, and we'll take that out. Then we'll start focusing on removing the transmission. That's it. I'm going to get this. Now we'll need to lift the transmission up a little bit with the jack, and we'll be able to pull that that rear differential rattle out of there. I can't get my words right for nothing today.
Okay,
Now we got it the weight lifted up off of there. Might want to get an extra hand during this step because this piece is heavy. Alright, now that you have the rear differential taken out, you have the rear transfer case off. You basically lift it out. You will have to take that front drive shaft off to get it out, unless you, depending on the setup of your exhaust system. But on this particular vehicle, we did have to take that front drive shaft off, and it pretty much slides forward. You'll have to remove one clip on the hose. It's like a little seal, but you'll have to cut that, and then the drive shaft will slide forward. So this is the rear view, and this is the side view, and you see all that space in there now? Now you can actually drop that transmission totally out of there if you need to, get it out of your way. I do know some guys that, guys that weld, they'll cut this pipe here, and they'll cut that pipe there. That way it gives them an easy transition just to drop the whole transmission out when they're doing it. Then they'll weld the pipe back. But, I don't have a welder, I don't weld, so I'm not going to cut that pipe. And this is just a rear main seal job, so we're going to basically take the transmission out, but we're not going to take it out of the vehicle. We're going to slide it back to give us enough room here to get to the rear main seal, as we were saying before. Now remember earlier I told you to disconnect your exhaust pipes. That helped you to get your cross member out, but also it's also provided a way so that when you lower the transmission, can you lower that for me? When you lower the transmission, now you see you have access to your bolts at the top of the transmission. And if you have nice long extensions, you can get up in there pretty good to remove those bolts pretty easily. And even if you can't, it gives you enough room, hand room, to get to those bolts. Say there's, if I can do this right. Yeah, there's one right there. There's a couple on the top usually, and on the sides. So we'll remove those bolts, then we'll be able to pull the whole transmission back, and like I said, that'll give us access to the rear main seal.